Oi, pessoal, meu nome é Peter Biondi, eu sou consultor, professor, jornalista na área de aviação. Eu estudo Airline Management há mais de 40 anos. Eu gostaria de mostrar para vocês essa pequena entrevista do Herb Kelleher, que foi a pessoa que, na verdade, começou a Southwest Airlines, muito famoso. Ele foi muito estudado na década de 80 e 90 e usado como referência na área de administração de empresas e especialmente na área de aviação. Então, tem esse vídeo aqui para você, muito bom, uma lição de vida, uma lição de liderança. Então, muito bom. Se você conhece pessoas que gostam de administração de empresas, de administração de empresas aéreas, podem passar esse pequeno vídeo aí. Muito obrigado, espero que vocês gostem aí. Obrigado.
And suddenly, my mother and I were there alone from 6 to 2 within a year and a half or 2 years. And she was just fabulous because she covered everything with me. Ethics, the way you should treat people, business. We used to sit up even when I was 10 and 12 and talk until 3 or 4 in the morning. And she was absolutely fantastic in that respect because she was not only a nurturing mother, but she also fed my mind on a continuing basis.
Why did you choose to go into law?
Well, I laugh about it because I took an aptitude test in my senior year, and it said that I probably would fare best as an editor, a reporter, or as a lawyer. And I figured, well, if I go to law school, I can avoid working for another 3 years, so I'm going to law school. But in actuality, that's what I wanted to do, was to go to law school.
In San Antonio was maybe not all of it, or maybe was all of it about helping people start businesses or helping them organize?
Well, a good bit of it. I have finally helped in forming my own law firm. Three of us from 3 different law firms joined together. And our focus was to a great extent on helping businesses get started. And one of our clients was funny, Tom, because he said, come on, you guys are kind of like one-stop shopping. He said, I walk in, I'm looking for a lawyer. The next thing you know, I have a banker. Next thing you know, I have a piece of real estate.
Then we're going public.
And I think learned some from it too by watching the pitfalls and some of the mistakes that budding entrepreneurs would make.
Mm-hmm.
And I did all kinds of things. I mean, I tried cases, I drew wills, I drew deeds, and there's something to be learned from all of those things. Was involved in politics, sort of inadvertently.
How?
Well, I moved to Texas and was not entitled to take the Texas bar for, I think it was 6 or 9 months, because New Jersey wouldn't admit lawyers from other states without a clerkship for 6 or 9 months. And so there I was, and my brother-in-law said, there's a fella going to run for governor, and since you're not doing anything, basically, he said, why don't you help us in his campaign? It was John Conley. And when that started out, Conley had 4% name recognition in Texas. This is really wild. Well, Conley won, and went on to become Secretary of the Navy.
So you were 1-0 really in your one political campaign.
Well, yeah, and I got involved in others as a byproduct of that.
And how did you know Rollin at that point, and why did that conversation come up?
Well, the conversation came up because Rollin became a client of mine, and so I represented his little airline, Twin Beach, operating short haul out of San Antonio, and he got into a squabble with a partner, and I got that straightened out for him, and then he became a law client of mine on a regular basis. And his banker was John Parker at the Alamo National Bank, and he was talking to John one day, and John had just gotten back from California. And John said, for $11.43, I flew from San Diego to San Francisco on Pacific Southwest, later PSA. And he said, why don't you think about starting something like that in Texas? Because Texas had the basis for that. Large state, large metropolitan areas, far enough apart to justify flying, you know. And so at first I was kind of skeptical and said to Rollin, you know, I'm not so sure this is a good idea. But then I spent time researching PSA in California, and I said, hey, this could really work.
What did you learn from PSA?
Well, they were a low-fare, low-cost airline, but they also had a certain, I guess you would say, panache with respect to the way that they talked to passengers and made jokes on the airplane and, you know, wore hot pants, things of that nature. And so they served as kind of a role model. Because the board said in '69, we're going to have to shut down because we've run out of money and we can't afford this litigation anymore. And I said, well, how about if I do it for nothing and pay the costs out of my own pocket?
Tough to turn that down.
And then if we ever get started, you know, you can reimburse me. And they said, well, that sounds okay.
Do you think it was imperative for Southwest to survive and succeed that one of their founders had legal training?
Yes. Yeah, and it wouldn't necessarily be me, but it was imperative that you have legal training. And the political training didn't hurt either because they were constantly attacking us in the Texas legislature and the United States Congress. Yeah, she was very egalitarian in that respect. She was a great teacher because she told me that that I should not necessarily pay obeisance to position or title, because she said, pay attention to the individual. The individual may have a grand position or title, but have feet of clay, you know, which I think all of us have to agree can be the case. And she also encouraged me to read very widely and unusually adult books, you know, for someone my age. And she stimulated my curiosity in a whole lot of things that I probably never would have gotten into. And curiosity, I think, is one of the great things that can be very, very helpful.
Why do so many airlines go bankrupt, and why has Southwest Airlines never laid off a single employee? I mean, well, certainly during your time, it was the best performing stock on the S&P 500, and since then, it's been a wonderful stock as well, all the way through. No layoffs. Why?
Well, first of all, and I think this has something to do with history and learning something about history. I was well aware that the airline industry was a very difficult industry. As you pointed out at one point, it had a net loss from its inception, which means it's fairly difficult, you know, fairly scary. And I said, you know, you hear about regression to the mean, and I'm not quarreling with that as a formula, but how long is it going to take to regress? You know, is it 5 years, 25 years, 38 years? And so what we're going to do is we are always going to be very, very strong from the balance sheet standpoint. Number one, we were one time, for a long time, we were the only airline that had an investment grade rating from the financial community. We're going to have lots of liquidity. And my mantra was, we want to manage in good times so that we do well in bad times. And there you get into the no furlough policy, because if you just hire a bunch of people willy-nilly during good times, guess what you're doing? You're firing them during bad times. So we were always well set up to ride through the bad times, and market share was not our focus. I compared market share to elephantiasis, you know, where sort
Do
of-
you really want the largest ears in the world?
Right, yeah, I was trying. You saw me just hesitate a little, didn't you? But my point was, I was trying to say, size in and of itself is unimportant. I would rather have 4% of the market and be profitable than have 24% of the market and lose money. So we're not going to talk about market share at all. It was verboten.
So the other airlines weren't doing that. They were trying to get as many.
They were at war with each
routes.
other. Who had the most airplanes and who get the most routes from the CAB and that sort of thing. And we eschewed all of that. And we opened a lot of secondary airports, satellite airports. And people initially said, oh, you'll never make a success out of a satellite airport. Well, there's hobby, there's love. You know, I can run through about 5 or 6 more of them. And of course, they were much more efficient to operate from, no backups. They were a lot closer and more convenient for an awful lot of people. And so we did things unconventionally that way. And we tried to keep our work rules very simple to promote the efficiency of the airline, and kind of, you know, operated on the philosophy that airplanes don't make money on the ground. They only make money in the air. Passengers don't pay you just to sit in them. They pay you to fly. So we very high utilization, productivity.
But
Yeah.
how can you have cost containment and balance sheet management and a great corporate culture? I mean, those things, we see that, we think there's a big tension there, and why isn't there at Southwest?
You know what? A friend of mine recently wrote a paper that he sent to me, and in it he said, corporations are always succumbing to the tyranny of no rather than the genius of yes. And what he was pointing out is that people sit down and say, well, we can either have low costs and lousy customer service,
Everything's a
or
compromise.
great customer service and high costs. And we said, no. You can have low costs and great customer service, and guess what? We're not offering you less for less fare. We're offering you more for less fare. And part of that, of course, was our culture. First of all, the warrior spirit of our employees who pitched in every battle. Secondly, the fun and warmth and hospitality that our people provided to our passengers. And thirdly, the kind of culture that was upbeat. We didn't ask people to change and become robots or automatons when they came to work. We kept telling them, look, we hired you because you're you.
Did anyone take that too far?
Well, what happened? Yeah.
I'm me, Herb.
Yeah.
I'm not going to wear clothes to work today.
Yeah, well, you put your finger on it per usual. When we had somebody who did something extraordinary, we didn't put in new rules pertaining to the whole company or one of its departments. We just sat down with them individually and talked to them and said, you cannot do that. But you know, if every time there's a sort of anecdotal incident,
A new policy comes
you put in a
place.
new policy, you're gradually strangling yourself with bureaucracy. As a matter of fact, when I saw a ticket agent in San Antonio after I became CEO, trying to answer a customer's question by going through these 2 loose leaf manuals, you know, looking for page 73, capital A, you know, small I, you know, we burn them. We burn them. And what we said was, we have a substitute. It's called Guidelines for Leaders. And the first sentence was, these are just guidelines. Feel free to break them. We were unleashing our people to be themselves with the customer. And Colleen Barrett, of course, played a great role in that. And she called it her flexibility policy. And basically she was saying, look, you know, we work like crazy to hire the right people with the right attitudes, positive, you know, generous,
Can
caring.
do.
Yeah, and so just unleash them. Unleash them. But
If you had, let's say, 2 or 3 leadership principles, if you had to boil them down to 2 or 3.
number one, you have to look out for the well-being of others more than you do for your own. Number two, that you have to really rejoice in your people and their accomplishments and praise them and recognize them all the time for what they have achieved. And be humble, I think. Be humble. Never think you've done something so great, you know, that now you're at the top of the pyramid, because that's when the pyramid starts to collapse and you slide down on your face, you know, and never be complacent.
How about 2 or 3 principles of business strategy?
Well, first of all, if one of your principles is that you're not going to furlough, that in and of itself is an incentive to stay lean, even when times are really good. You know, it's a discipline, and a valuable one, I think. Number two, particularly with respect to young entrepreneurs, including myself, they're optimists, Tom, and I think, and that optimism is needed. You know, to be an entrepreneur, you're one. I ought to be interviewing you, but sometimes you don't realize how long it's going to take and how much capital it's going to take to bring it to realization. And so you don't raise enough money at the beginning. And sometimes with the young people, I have found, representing young people who want to start up their own businesses, I found that they think that just having the idea is all they have to do. And I keep telling them, no, there's a lot of sweat that goes into it. You know, you just don't announce your idea and suddenly golden coins start raining down from heaven like a manna on you. And there's a hell of a lot of lonely work to do to make it come to pass and to be successful. But the thing that I have always emphasized is culture, because I think that is the most powerful competitive weapon that you can have, because it's intangible, it's spiritual. You can't buy it. You know, other airlines can buy airplanes, they can lease space, but if they don't have the kind of outgoing, participative, happy, devoted culture that you have, you're going to have the edge. And so I've always said, you know, I'm so fortunate because my avocation is simultaneously my vocation. So there's no challenge, there's no tension, there's no hostility between the two. I'm doing what I love to do for a company I love and help to create, and for people that I adore. And what could be more rewarding, more enjoyable than that? I refer to our people as my fountain of youth. I said, you know, Ponce de Leon was in the wrong place looking for the fountain of youth in Florida. He should have come to work for Southwest Airlines. That's where you find your fountain of youth from our people.